was the nastiest stuff, ersatz stuff you ever, in a soup-like thing. And the first 2 or 3 days, he couldn't stand it. But then at night, we had, they were very nice and bought us a whole pail of mashed potatoes. And everybody stood around while everybody got the same portion. They made sure that we all ate the same thing. So that was what we had to eat. But the Red Cross was commissioned to bring in parcels for prisoners of war. Their idea of a parcel, I mean, this thing could feed a family of 4, but they managed to screw it up actually on purpose. Why? If we had tuna fish, punching a hole in it. But if they had this, punching a hole in it, punching a hole in this. So we had to either eat it or throw it out because it was going to spoil. And we'd get a few cigarettes. Maybe the parcel would feed 8 guys, and you got what was left. And the most important thing, cigarettes. Well, I was a smoker, but I certainly learned not to smoke, because that became the barter, the money of the camp. When we would play cards, poker, you'd all bet cigarettes. And it was a known thing that a cigarette was worth so much. And one day I had a windfall, I won all the cigarettes. I said, oh God, I'm rich. Next day, here came a parcel of Red Cross parcel with new cigarettes. Inflation. But the food was meager. As we mentioned, I lost 96 pounds. We weighed 96 pounds when I was through. So we didn't get fed, that's for sure.
No, some of the other guys that were up here talking about their experiences talked about the organization of the camp. You were a total, pretty much air crew, only enlisted air crew.
That's right.
How did you guys organize? Did you guys organize ranking?
Well, yes, we did. We have some people that were there, had been there for more time than we were, and they were in charge. And that we managed to get, as they talked about, news. The British we had British soldiers in there as well as Russian. And the British had sneaked in parts of a radio that they put together in the camp. They put it in parcels that they were sending them. And they put together a radio. So every week or so, or 10 days or whatever, they'd come by your barracks and you'd all huddle around and you could listen to the radio. And they'd kind of explain what was going on, what the news was. And so we were informed about what was happening outside. And we began to hear rumbles and boom, boom, boom. And we saw airplanes flying over the camp. And so we all began to say, geez, what's going on? And this was later, after Christmas, down the line. And back to the Red Cross parcel. The Germans were very lenient and gave every man a parcel to himself. It had powdered milk, it had candy, it had cigarettes, it had canned goods, all punched, but all good. And they gave us this at Christmas time. Well, there was so much food, nobody could eat it. Everybody got sick because the guy gorged himself and they all got sick. So what good did the parcel do? Except for the cigarettes. Everybody grabbed the cigarettes. And the powdered milk was a big thing because they made cricket cakes and we did all kinds of things with powdered milk. And but that was about the food. That's about the last one we got that was any good.
Christmas time. All right, so we're going to fast forward a little bit through about February, March of 45, and not a lot of people have heard, it was in your video, the Other Death March.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the Other Death March and your experience with it?
Okay, we were, we could hear, as I say, we could hear the guns both sides, and the airplanes were in the air. And the commandant came on the loudspeaker and said, everybody get their goods together, their stuff they want to take out. We're moving. We're moving all the people out of the camp. So we tried to, get our meager stuff. We all had a blanket, which is about thick as this piece of paper, and that's it. We put it over our shoulder, and next morning at 6 o'clock, they opened the gates, and he said, well, this is going to be a very short time. We won't be on the road long. We're looking for another facility. Well, that night, or that toward dusk, they said, well, the place we're available isn't available. So we're going to have to sleep in that field over there. Well, I mean, this is a disaster because there is mud up to your kneecaps. And so we laid down and went to bed. Got up the next morning and we started out again. And the word was around, where are we going? Where are we going? We stopped the next night, same thing. No food, no nothing. Pretty soon it dawned on us that this wasn't going to be a little short thing. Some of the troops in the camp had been gone another route. The sick and the invalid people were separated off of about 8,000 or 9,000 people. The British were in another unit. The Russians, of course, were ignored. And we started out with probably 3,000 GIs. Well, it began to be a very hard road because we would be walking every single day. How many miles a day? I can't tell you. But I know that we walked until it was dark. Sometimes we would have a barn available, and it was a funny thing. We'd all go in, and I had 4 buddies, the crew members, and the best thing in the world to do was we put our blankets together and laid down all in a row. Well, one guy, and 2 guys in the middle and 2 guys on the outside. Well, if one of the guys in the middle had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, he lost his place and he ended up on the outside every time. Because that's just how we kept warm, is body temperature. But this is how we endured every day for 3 months. No food. We scrounged for food in the German fields. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a kohlrabi or not, but a kohlrabi is a big overgrown turnip. And everybody fell in love with the kohlrabi because you could peel it and eat it. But the results were unbelievable. The gas you had in your stomach after eating one of those things was, whoa, you couldn't imagine the pain. And so, but they kept on eating them because that's all we had. Once in a while, a guard would get generous and peel off a piece of sausage for us as we walked along beside him. Here, meat, give us the meat. Oh God, that was a godsend. But we didn't get anything prepared by the Germans. We ate off the land. And that's why 8 pounds later, we didn't have any food. So.
You talked a little bit before about when you and I were speaking about Dr. Captain Kaplan.
Yes, by all means, I want to give him a shout out.
Okay.
This guy was a miracle worker. He had jumped on a flight out of the 8th Air Force on a B-17, And they like to do that because they like to get flying time. They think they want to see how the other half lives. And so he got caught out on a flight that was shot down. And he ended up in our camp. And his weapons against disease and all the other things that were involved with the camp, with bicarbonate of soda pills and charcoal. Charcoal was a remedy for diarrhea. I don't know what the bicarbonate of soda things were. I never had one, but I had a lot of charcoal. And this man followed us foot by foot by foot by foot. And when somebody would get sick, he would commandeer a wagon and let them ride rather than him riding with them. And he ended up at the end with us. He came the whole way, 600 miles.
600 miles.
Which I think was admirable of a guy that just happened to be there by mistake. So I would really, and he even got accommodation from the White House. He was a super guy. Everybody loved him.
So you guys went 600 miles, 86 days, started with 5,000 to 6,000, 1,500 weren't there when you guys were ended.
Well, we got down to 3,000 and 1,500, they began to fall out. Mm-hmm. And you didn't know what happened to them, but you got gunshots in the distance because we kept walking on. So they were died on the road or they were shot. And we ended up with about 1,500. And we ended up in a Focke-Wulf factory that was been deserted. The guards were gone. Something had happened during the night when we were there. So we figured out, this may be the end. But I developed a severe bout with diarrhea. And Dr. Kaplan was over in a kind of a clinic he set up a couple blocks away. And now the Germans went around. So I went over there and got the charcoal deal, and he said, well, you better stay here for the night because you got a pretty severe case of this stuff. And I said, okay, it's all right with you, I'll stay right here. So at the end of the night, we heard a banging on the door, and like that. And opened the door, and here's a Russian Cossack on his horse. Motioned for us all to come out, come out, come out. They had a truck there available, and they loaded us in a truck. And they trying to find out where we were going, what was happening, because I know the main body was back here, 2 blocks away. Had no idea what was happening to them, but they took us to another town, Riesa, Germany, unloaded us into a compound with walls all around it. The decent thing they did is they gave us some soup. And this was kind of a regular thing that we got soup. But we were hearing rumors that maybe we weren't as well off as we thought, that maybe we were being held hostage for various reasons, or we could be turned over to the Russian army and sent into Russia, which is a great possibility. So about 20 of us got together and we decided maybe the best thing for us to do right now is go over the wall and try and make it back to American lines. And here we still had no food. So I hooked up with 2 other guys, one from Detroit and a fellow that was very fluent, and he was Albanian, but he could speak Russian. Thank God for him. Because here we are out in the middle of nowhere in Poland and Germany, walking around. We had no direction to where we were going. and we were just wandering around, and we were running into Russian troops, and they were very, very menacing. And he said, Amerikansky, Amerikansky. I learned that word very, very easily, because that saved our life. We could tell them we were Americans. But they weren't too helpful. Their main thing was, hey, I can get you a woman over here. Do you want that? We couldn't even stand up. Wants a woman? But they had plenty of them, I'll tell you. And said, no, we'll keep on going. So we got bicycles, we got horses, we got anything that would help us along. In the meantime, we stopped at German houses that were vacant in hopes of finding food. Well, they'd taken everything they had, but they did leave some clothes. And this was our one big mistake. The clothes we'd had on for 6, 8, 9 months. I could take a knife and scrape the dirt off the pants. And so I said, guys, let's change clothes. We got some clothes here, the German clothes, like you and I got slacks and a shirt. So, okay, let's go do that. And so that was a mistake, because everywhere we went from then on, you're German citizens, you're in trouble. And even when we got to the river that we wanted to cross, the guards across the river said, stop, you're Germans, you can't come. Because we had no proof. All we had was the dog tags, and we kept shaking the Amerikansky. And the river was blocked. So we had to climb down it. We had all rocks all over, climb down. It took us 20 or 30 minutes to navigate the river, climb up the other side, and walked in with American, and said, we're Americans, with our hands up. He said, who's Babe Ruth? Well, I said, he's probably the greatest baseball player in the world. Oh, are you Americans? I said, look here, got dog tags again. So come on over, come on in. And the first thing we got was a chocolate bar, that big around, about that long. I said, thank you very much for the candy. I love it. And that's the first meal we had in months, any kind of a meal. But they began to feed us and feed us and feed us. But I did weigh 98 pounds. I went in at 157. And they were trying to fatten us up, is what they were doing, and we could have a meal anytime we want. We got into Camp Lucky Strike, as Mr. Wolf had talked about, and this was a waiting place for return to the United States. So we were very anxious and and we kept asking, when are we going to go? When are we going to go? And they said, oh, we'll get you going soon. And pretty soon we said, we're expecting the general, is what they said. We're expecting the general. I said, boy, maybe this is our chance. So who should ride into camp at Eisenhower? And there was all prisoners of war. These were a bunch of prisoners of war. And he stood up on his Jeep and he said, men, he said, I know you've been here a long time. He said, I'm doing everything in my power to get you out of here, and within the next few days, you'll be leaving. True to his word, we were taken to England and put on the Queen Mary, or Queen Elizabeth, and 15,000 of us started on our way home. And that's my story.
Well, Jim, we're about out of time.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate all the stories. It made me talk less, which is better. Thank you for volunteering for the Air Corps.
Thank you.
Thank you for volunteering again to get in that ball turret and face that flak, those fighters.
That was fun.
Yeah. For honoring our country as a POW, and then the determination you had to survive that long march
Yes.
and to get back to the American lines.
Yes.
So on behalf of the Air Force and the United States of America, we thank you for your service.
Well, I think my message would be survival. God, when you feel down and you're not going to make it, you say, I'm going to survive. And that's what I did. And I would like to say this. I've been associated with this guy for 8 or 9 months. He's been in San Antonio, and we've talked. And he's one of the best people in the world to do this job. He asked me questions that I had almost forgotten. I don't know how you're graded on this thing, but you should. A number 1.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Kirk.
Okay.